Good to go.
Hey everybody, this is Wiggs and Papa Wiggs coming to you from Fantasy Fools YouTube channel. We're gonna do our Fantasy Fool top 30 QBs for the 2024 season. So we're gonna start and we're gonna go from 30, and work our way up to number one. This is the average of where the QBs fell between how I ranked them and Wiggs ranked them. So we're gonna it'll show where I had them, where he had them, and then how they fell in the top 30. So hopefully this information will be useful for everybody. We're gonna kind of break down each of the players and our thoughts and go from there. You want to add anything?
Nope, I think we'll just dive on into her. Number 30, Drake Maye. Your thoughts on him?
See, so I had him at 31. You had him at 30. So Drake Maye to me is an interesting QB this year. I know that New England's got Brisket as well, and I know Wiggs has got a little different opinion on how that might shake out. Yeah, I think he's going to definitely be starting this year. There's no question in my mind that he's going to be starting, especially where they picked him. And so, but I don't have a high level of confidence that he's going to have a huge fantasy year. I think that New England is really just going to be they're going to struggle this year. I think that they'll have a decent running game, but I don't know that they're going to have a lot of production from their receivers. I'd be really surprised if they even have 1,000-yard receiver this year, just based on how they're probably going to run their offense. Or probably going to rely on their defense. So from my aspect, I think he falls into number 30 just given who's left out there, after them. But I do think he's going to have a decent career if they use him right and they get him some decent weapons. I just think he's going to struggle this year given where he fell in regards to the draft, to which team and the players around him.
Yeah, I ranked him here at 30 because I also think he'll have a bit of a tough year. I could potentially see him being like around the 25 or 24, 25 area as well, but I think it's just going to be hard for him to get into the flow of things right away. I could also see Brissett starting a few games here at the start of the year possibly as well. But like you said, it's gonna be tough for him with like the receiving core he's got, and I don't think there'll be 1,000-yard receiver either. But I think we'll see a few guys in KJ Osborne and Demario Douglas who could have like a good 700 or 800 yards, and I could see Drake Maye throwing for maybe like 3,250 to 350 yards or 3,500 yards, but I don't know. It's a tough spot because you don't really have like a solid wide receiver one, and you have like 4 or 5 different guys that you don't know how they're gonna like produce throughout the year and what connections he'll grow with those receivers, and it's kind of hard to judge without like seeing him play yet too.
Yeah, I think out of the rookie quarterbacks, you got Caleb Williams, who fell into a pretty good situation with Chicago. You got Jayden Daniels. Again, I think he fell into not a bad situation in Washington in regards to what they have there. And then obviously, I think Maye's gonna definitely do better than Penix, because I don't think Penix is really even gonna see the light of day in the regular season unless Kirk Cousins gets hurt. And McCarthy, he's going to be battling with Darnold for the starting position, and with us both, coming from Minnesota and kind of a little bit engaged with the Vikings. Everything you hear there is, it's still not, a lot of people seem to think that Darnold is going to be starting, which could very well happen, but I think it's still up in the air in Minnesota. I definitely think Maye has a higher chance, or definitely is going to be starting for sure, whereas there's a little question in regards to McCarthy. Then you have Bo Nix, with Denver. I know a lot of people seem to think that Peyton might not go with Nix right away. I disagree with that. So I think I think Nix has got a shot to start as well. But out of the rookie quarterbacks, outside of maybe even Nix, I think fell in a better situation a little bit. Just from a wide receiver perspective, I just think Maye got the short. He drew the short straw.
Moving on to 29. Danny Dimes. We're pretty close on both of these so far.
Yeah.
28-29, 31-30.
Yeah, I'm not a huge Danny Dimes fan. I did put him at 28. I think there's a lot of question marks around him. I don't remember what he threw for last year, but I think it was. Do you remember? Was it?
He was hurt last year.
That's right. He was hurt last year. He started the beginning of the year, though.
Yeah,
I think.
I can look it up here.
So, but anyways, I know he was hurt and stuff, but I'm just not. I'm not a huge Danny Dimes fan. I think he's got a lot to prove. Yeah, it looks like
5 weeks.
Looks like he played 5 weeks, so he really didn't have a lot of stat value last year. I think the fact that they brought in and drafted Neighbors is is definitely a good start to help build their offense. But I don't, I think they brought in Singletary as their running back.
And they drafted one too.
And they drafted one, but I don't think their running back crew is. They definitely took a hit with losing Barkley. And I know that they got Wendell Robinson, I believe it is, as their other receiver. I just don't see Danny Dimes progressing the way other people might think. And it looks like he's got Robinson, and then there's Darius Slayton, and then the tight end. I think, who's their tight end there? So they got
because they lost their tight end to retirement.
Yeah, they lost Waller to retirement. So I think their offense is going to be kind of in shambles, and I think Dimes has got a lot to prove, but I'm just not seeing it in him this year, and I think it's going to be a struggle.
Yeah, I think it'll be a struggle for him as well. He's really done nothing since joining the league that's impressed me, at least. The fact that he got paid a ton of money and then got hurt, and then there was even talks about them trying to draft a quarterback at one point this year. Like, it just, I don't know, it doesn't look good. And like you said, they doesn't really have like a ton of great weapons outside of, Malik Neighbors. Like, Wandale Robinson definitely could have a good year, but it's going to take more than just those two guys to have a good year. Devin Singletary would have to have a pretty solid year as well. And then they drafted Tracy, I believe. I think they actually may have drafted two guys here. But you look at the rest of the receivers. You got Isaiah Hodgins, Allen Robinson, Isaiah McKenzie, like Jalen Hyatt. Like you just never know what you're gonna get there from their wide receiver three or even their top two guys. So it's kind of hard to put him higher. He definitely could have a better year than what we have him ranked. Like I could easily see him being around like the 20 spot. But that would take, 1,000 yard year from his rookie and like almost 1,000 yard year from Wandale and a decent run game, which the run game I just don't see happening. You take a major hit from losing your best player on your offense the last few years to now you got Devin Singletary who had a mediocre year at best in Houston last year.
Yeah, and I given that he's in the NFC East,
That's a tough division.
I mean, they Washington, the Eagles, and the Cowboys probably have three of the, top tier defenses in the league. And he's going to have to play those guys 6 times. I just, man, I think he's going to struggle, especially within those division games, because I think those defenses are going to pound away at him. I think it's going to be just a really hard year for Danny Dimes. So I'm not I'm not expecting him to light the fire this year for fantasy for sure.
Yeah, and like you said, looking at it from a fantasy perspective, like you're talking 6 weeks there where it's going to be a question mark on how many points you're going to get from him. So yeah, that's super tough. And overall, I don't know, he hasn't done anything to really impress me at least. 28, got JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, so the only reason why this guy snuck up in our top 30 is because this guy right over here. So I had him at 32. I know Wiggs had him at 21. I don't know what Wiggs was smoking the day that he ranked him at 21, but it must have been some really good stuff. Here's my thought, and first of all, I'm not convinced that he's going to be starting at the beginning of the year. Personally, I think if he goes in and he has a training camp and he shows the coaches the same stuff that Darnold does, and they're both right there with each other, equal in training camp in regards to what they do with all their stuff. I think they got to start him. That's my opinion. You traded up one pick to get number 10, so you gave up some value there.
You gave up a lot of value
in the draft for that. And you brought in Sam Darnold, which I've had this discussion with Wiggs before. Darnold's had his shot. I know he hasn't been on great teams. I know that I'll give him a pass when it comes to the Jets. But when he went to Carolina, he did have the best running back in the league. He did have DJ Moore. He did he had stuff there. He still didn't improve it. Darnold's past history has always been he's always had a great camp, but then when it's come to the regular season, he just makes mistakes. That's what he does. He throws interceptions. He doesn't see the field well. I know everybody thinks that he's gonna it's gonna be different because he's with KOC at Minnesota. I'm sorry, I don't see it that way. I know some people have talked that the Vikings are going to take it slow with McCarthy. Listen, you don't trade up one pick and give up the value that the Vikings did to get this guy at the number 10 pick, to have him sit for a whole entire year. That's not how it works in the NFL, especially if you're a coach or a general manager who's on the hot seat, which, let's be honest, KOC and Kwesi for the Vikings right now, they were, from everything I've read and I've seen, they were told they need to find their guy in the draft, and they did, and they're telling everybody that they did. So are they really going to sit by and watch Sam Darnold start all year and put their jobs on the line for Sam Darnold? I don't think so. I think that McCarthy is definitely going to be starting at some point. Me personally, I think unless he really blows training camp, you just got to throw him in there and start him at the right away at the start of the season, especially when you're playing the Giants your first game. That I'm not saying the Giants are a bad team, but that would be a good team for him to get his feet wet against, build up some confidence and stuff. Um, so I think 28's might be a little bit high for him on here, because obviously we don't know for sure if he's going to start yet. If he does start, I can definitely see him, potentially being in the top 30. So I'll give Wiggs credit on that. I don't think he's going to make it all the way up to 21, uh, but I do see that he would definitely be, in the top 30 for sure. So it'll be interesting to see how the Vikings um, decide to use him this year. You just signed JJ. You got Addison. Obviously, Addison may or may not be starting right away in the season because of some of the off-field issues that he's had. But you still have the weapons in the backfield that you have with Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler. You've got a decent replacement for Hawkinson right now, and Tanyan, and other some other options at tight end. Yeah, you have some question about some of the depth on their wide receiver. I still think that they may either trade or bring in a free agent wide receiver, especially now what's happened with Addison. We'll have to wait and see on that. So um, there's a lot of questions up in the air about this guy. I wasn't a huge fan of the pick. Yeah, he's a winner. Yeah, he came from Michigan. Yeah, he played for Jim Harbaugh, but I don't think he proved anything from the aspect of being able to go into the NFL and pass coming out of a run heavy offense in college with Jim Harbaugh. But maybe he'll prove me wrong, and I hope he does. So, what do you think, Wicks?
Yeah, I put him at 21 under the assumption that he's gonna end up starting every single game, and if I am in the Vikings spot, like I got to be realistic here. You're looking at a 1-4 start at best. You have a really tough schedule to start the year on off. Like, yes, your easiest game is the Giants, which is week 1, but then after that you have like the Jets, the Texans, the Packers, and a few other teams. I think even coming out of the bye week at 1-4, we're gonna end up being 1-5 because we play the Lions coming right out of the bye. So realistically, what's the point in starting Darnold? It doesn't matter if he's starting or McCarthy's starting. You're gonna be 1-4 realistically. You'll be lucky to steal a game or two even out of that, and even then you're looking at a 2-3 or 3-2 or 3-3 start. Like it's nothing like too crazy, so why not just throw him into the mix right away, see if he can keep games close against the 49ers or the Jets or the Texans at that, and see if he can get like a solid footing. There's no point in not doing that if you draft him as early as you did, and you gave up a ton of value to move up one spot to pick him when you probably could have got him at the next spot or at least gotten Knicks and then could have worked around Darnold that way. I find it hard to believe that you wouldn't start a player you drafted that early. And like if you listen to people talk about the situation, like Randy Moss, for example, was in a video recently I saw on X where he was talking about if you got drafted in the first round, you're a starter on the team. And it makes no sense nowadays that if you get drafted in the first round, that you're going to be a bench player. And someone like Michael Penix, I think, got the short end of the stick on that end, getting picked there before JJ and then being stuck behind Cousins for at least 2 years. So I don't know. I find it hard to believe you don't start him. Um, and like you said, Darnold's had a chance to prove himself. Like, yes, he hasn't been on an offense that has, Jay Jettas on it, but still, like, give the man a shot. He's got the weapons. You'll have Jefferson right away. You'll have Addison after whatever suspension or if he gets suspended comes in. Hawkinson when he comes back from injury. Even without Hawkinson, you still got Tunyon. You got a few other guys as well there at tight end. Like you never know what the tight end two will be with Hawkinson hurt. And then you have Aaron Jones, Ty Chandler. Like you got a ton of weapons. Just let the man play and figure it out.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. And everybody knows as soon as Darnold stumbles, uh, not only are the fans going to be screaming for McCarthy, but ownership is going to be all over not only Kwesi but KOC to make the switch. So to me, why
Don't even
even do
hesitate.
that?
Yeah.
Why even do that? Why even play around with it like that? Just go in, and like I said, unless he has a major setback during training camp in regards to where he's, not picking up something or looking, really mediocre, and Darnold's lighting up the fire and looking way better than him. Okay, maybe that's why you start Darnold, but if he's right up there and he's looking as good, if not better than Darnold, to me, you got to put him in as your starting quarterback right away. It just doesn't make sense to wait.
Moving on to 27. Justin Herbert. Now, this one will probably make quite a few people upset with how low he is, but I think it's reasonable considering the fact that they brought in a run heavy coach, and honestly, their wide receiving core, in my opinion, is quite lackluster, so I just don't see him having like a crazy year.
No, and I think last year he threw for what? Uh, uh, was it around 4,000 yards? Um,
3,130.
yeah. So last year, last year was around 3,100 yards. That was with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams there, with Eckler there, with you know, all the I think Everett was there last year. This year they brought in a brand new coach in Jim Harbaugh. Uh, I think that Herbert is a. I'm a huge Herbert fan. I really am. I think that this guy has a lot of talent. I think that they really missed the boat, with the weapons that they had. But I think bringing in Jim Harbaugh is really going to hurt his production from a fantasy football perspective. Yeah, they went out and they drafted um, a few receivers. I think what McConkey was one of them,
Yep.
and
Brendan Rice.
they got Brandon Rice, and then they got what Palmer's in there still, I believe.
Yep. Johnston.
So they have it's not like they have a terrible receiving core, but they're really young and they gave up all their weapons. And the one thing that Jim Harbaugh has always been shown to do is run the ball. I think he's gonna pound the rock, and he's gonna rely on the defense to hold the score down. I think they're gonna have low scoring games. You know, with the Chargers. I just don't see Herbert lighting it up this year. Um, I had him ranked at 24, and that was just being generous because of who he is, because I'm a big fan. But it wouldn't surprise me if some of these other guys, hop over him that are below him, just given the fact that uh, uh, um, the options that they have for targets at receivers and stuff. So I think he's going to have a challenging year. I think it's unfortunate for him too because he just signed a big contract with them. So again, maybe he'll surprise me. I just don't see it in a Jim Harbaugh run offense. That's just me.
Yeah, I think he'll have a tough year because like you don't have Mike Williams and Keenan Allen like you have had since you've joined the league. I think you took a major downgrade by not having either. Like, don't get me wrong, Williams was consistently hurt, but Keenan Allen was like his guy. And like looking back at his prior years, like last year he was hurt throughout the bulk of the year. He didn't have Williams. He lost Allen for a little bit as well to injury, but the year prior, 4,700 yards. The year before that, 5,000 yards in the second year with almost 40 touchdowns. Like he knows how to get the ball to his receivers. He knows how to get it to his running backs. Um, he's just in a tough spot. Now, it wouldn't surprise me if somehow he came out on fire this year and got some good connections with his receivers. I could totally see him being like a top like 12 quarterback this year. It's just hard to judge right now with how little we've seen of his other receivers. Like you have a few rookies. Joshua Palmer was all right when Keenan Allen and Mike Evans were hurt last year. He was the wide receiver one there for I think 2 weeks, 3 weeks maybe, but he didn't like have any outstanding games. I don't necessarily blame that on him. Herbert was hurt in and out of last year with his thumb and a few other things, but
Yeah, he only played 13 games last year, so that's probably why his production. If you had those 4 games, there's a chance that he could have been around
like
maybe
36, 37.
Yeah, maybe that, maybe close to 4,000.
Yeah.
So, the other thing that makes me believe that they're not going to be passing the ball as much as they used to is that they were really active going after running backs in the offseason. And they really, they drafted some guys at receiver, but they really were not active in the receiver market at all. So that just tells me that, Harbaugh's plan is, to run the rock.
Yeah.
So.
And like you said, they signed Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. They didn't sign any receivers or anything, so
yeah,
it's hard to judge. Now, coming from a draft perspective, I wouldn't sway away from Herbert. He still could have a pretty solid year, but he's gonna be a backup at best on most rosters. So
yeah, I don't view him. In a 12-man PPR, there is definitely a lot better options at QB. Based on your scoring structure than Herbert. He's, to me, and until we see something different, he's a backup at best in fantasy. Bye-week replacement.
Russell Wilson.
Yeah, so Russell here. Listen, I'm not a huge Russell Wilson guy. I think Russell is at this point of his career where he's looking at the business aspect rather than the football aspect. I just don't think, I'm just not a huge Russell Wilson fan. I thought he was great in Seattle. Is there a chance that he could come back and get, be the Russell Wilson of old? Sure, there's a chance of it. Do I see that happening? No, I don't. I think, he went to Pittsburgh. Yes, he's got George Pickens. Yes, he's got Freiermuth. Yes, he's got 2 really good running backs there. And I know Wiggs probably will disagree with me on this, but listen, he was in Denver last year, and Denver wasn't, the greatest situation. The receivers were getting hurt and stuff like that. And I get that, but until Russell shows me that he's all in, from the aspect of, I'm definitely all in. I'm going to be a great teammate, and I'm focused on winning, and I'm not focused on the business aspect. I just don't see him lightening up. And I'll be quite honest, with them bringing in Justin Fields like they did, I definitely feel like Justin Fields is a real similar quarterback to Russell Wilson when he was in his prime, right? So I think they did that to push Russell Wilson, and I just feel like if Fields at any point shows them that he's the guy, they're gonna put him in there. Or if he does it during training camp, I think they could do it. But do I think it'll realistically happen? No, I think Russell will be the starting quarterback. I think if they struggle though, at any point during the season, if they start off and they start losing games and they go 0-3, 0-4, people are going to start calling for Justin Fields, just like we talked earlier, with the McCarthy situation. I think it's the same kind of deal there in Pittsburgh. I know a lot of people seem to think that the Steelers brought Fields in because, maybe they'd have an opportunity to trade him if somebody needed a quarterback, stuff like that. I don't. I think they brought Fields in for an insurance policy in case Russell Wilson doesn't, produce like the Russell Wilson of old. And I'm not convinced that he's all in. So for that's why I had him ranked at 27. So you know, again, from a fantasy football perspective, I don't view Russell Wilson as anything more than a bye week replacement. I think there's better options, even if a quarterback gets hurt, than him, until he proves me wrong in the regular season and we see him doing something positive. That's just how I feel about him. Wiggs, I know you're probably a little bit different.
Yeah, I disagree on a few things there, but I think Russell Wilson's going to have a bounce back year here in Pittsburgh. He's got better weapons around him. You look at the Broncos offense, like your number one receiver in Cortland Sutton hurt throughout the majority of his time there. And then his other receivers, I think, Tim Patrick, hurt, who was supposed to be like their wide receiver too. Jerry Jeudy didn't have any outstanding years there, and he was so hyped up when drafted. You have a few others in Roman Wilson and people that are on this Pittsburgh offense where he could have a good impact with moving into this offense. Like, I think George Pickens is going to have over 1,400 yards this year and have quite a few touchdowns. I think Wilson's going to have a connection with Pickens kind of like he had with Metcalf, and I know that might be a little bit of a hot take, but that's going to happen. That's just my take. That's what's going to happen this year, and he's going to throw for over 4,000 yards and get back to what he was doing in Seattle. He had a very mediocre receiving core, and his running back core there in Denver was just not good, and he still threw for an average of 3,250 yards even with that. So I think moving into a system where you have a set wide receiver one who's proven himself, you have a few other players in Van Jefferson and Roman Wilson, and then you have two running backs that are clearly receiving running backs, so either one of them could have pop-off years. Like, he's just in a much better situation now. That doesn't mean I'd start him on my team. He'd be a backup at best for me, but I could see him being a top half quarterback come the end of the year.
All right, let's get into the top 25.
Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, so I had him ranked a little bit higher than Wiggs did. Last year, I thought Mayfield finally found a home in Tampa Bay. He threw for, what was it, over 4,000 yards?
Yeah.
And he played all 17 games last year. Threw for, 28 touchdowns?
Yep.
So I think he's got a really proven wide receiver core there. I think Mike Evans is a lot like Keenan Allen. Year in, year out, this guy just is consistent. You got Chris Godwin. They've got a really, what is it? Is it Kate Otten, I think it is, or
yep.
Their tight end. They've got a really good set of weapons on offense. I think White as their running back. These guys are, I think, going to be even better this year on offense. I think Mayfield's found his home now in Tampa Bay ever since leaving Cleveland. They obviously believed in him, and he wants to be there. He let them, they made the playoffs last year, I believe, as well. I think that Mayfield he's actually one of my sleeper picks this year, because I really feel that he could have an even better year this year than he did last year, because last year was his first year there. Now he's getting into his second year. They've brought back the core of his offense, so They brought in another young, I believe Bucky Irving they drafted. They got Chase Edmonds, but that Bucky Irving is I think is going to be another good weapon at running back for them. So I think Baker Mayfield's going to surprise a lot of people this year. It wouldn't surprise me if he goes out there and he throws for 4,500 yards this year and has over 30 touchdowns. Because every year, people think, Evans he's gonna regress, and every year Evans comes out and just proves them wrong. The guy's just freak of nature, consistent, and if Godwin can bounce back, their receiving core is really really not going to be that bad. So, and given the fact that they now have a running back, that's going to produce some White, I think sky's the limit with Baker this year.
Yeah, I think Baker will have another pretty good year. I don't know how good it'll be. It's kind of hard to judge because he really hasn't put like 2 years back to back together yet in his career. So that's why I kind of ranked him a little bit lower because I don't know what I'm going to get from him this year. And looking at the stats from last year, like from a fantasy perspective, like I think the standard at QB was a little bit lower than what it's been in the past. Like, at least in our league, he was ranked 10th, and that was throwing 4,000 yards and 28 touchdowns. Back in like his second year, he was sitting around the 18 spot with like 3,800 yards. So it's kind of interesting from a numbers perspective to look at the range, but yeah, I really just don't know how to judge him because he hasn't put 2 years back to back together, and I kind of just played it safe. Again, he's another quarterback that would be a backup at best. So, yeah, but he's got Mike Evans. That's an easy 1,000 yards there. He could have Chris Godwin at 1,000 yards if Godwin has a good year. Godwin's shown he can have 1,000 yards next to Mike Evans. So those two alone should do decent for him. Kate Otten won't be bad either, and then obviously Rashad White's Rashad White. So I think he proved himself last year, and he can run and receive the ball at any given point.
Yeah, I agree. Again, he's one of my sleeper picks this year. So, do I think he's necessarily a starter in fantasy right now? I think he's right on the border. But I think that if somebody goes down with an injury and is going to miss time, he's definitely a guy you can plug in there and have some confidence in him having a good game for you.
To move on from that, we got Jayden Daniels.
Yeah, so here's another one. I know a lot of people are going to think I'm crazy, but hear me out. I'm a huge Jayden Daniels fan. I think that this guy has everything that you need to be a great quarterback. I think he's walking into a situation in Washington where he is going to jump in and really kind of surprise some people this year. I know a lot of people are going to say, well, he's a rookie. He's going to make a lot of mistakes, and that may well be. But listen, I think Jayden, he has the ability with the receiving core that they have in Washington. McLaurin has always been underrated. I think Dotson is going to have a good year. They also have isn't Samuel in Washington as well, I believe?
No, he's Buffalo now.
He's in Buffalo now, that's right. So he's got
Luke McCaffrey.
He's got Luke McCaffrey, yeah. And Luke's one of my sleeper guys this year. I think that Luke is got a shot to be definitely a high-end rookie receiver this year. it's in his blood. His dad, I think he's going to be a lot like his dad. It's so. I think their running back situation is really good. I think Brian Robinson and Eckler are two good weapons. I think Robinson's going to have the better season out of the two, but I think those are two guys that are going to just help. They drafted they got Zach Ertz, but they also drafted a rookie tight end and Sanat. I think that they've got a lot of weapons there for Daniels. I think the use of his legs is going to help him as long as he protects himself. I know a lot of people are going to say, hey, listen, Richardson last year did that and he got hurt. I just see Jayden Daniels again. I'm high on him. I think he's going to be a surprise in fantasy football this year. It's not going to surprise me at all if he has a significant amount of rushing yards. He could have he could be like Josh Allen where he has rushing TDs in the red zone just because of his legs. I could see him definitely throwing for over 3,500 yards, and around maybe the 25 to 30 touchdown range. I definitely could see him possibly running for 400 or 500 yards and having maybe 3 or 4 rushing touchdowns. From a fantasy perspective, that's gold. So I think this guy has a real shot to go out there and have a really great year. Now, with that said, keep in mind he's going to make mistakes. So if you draft him, know that there's going to be some growing pains, especially at the beginning of the year. There's a very real possibility that he could throw a few interceptions this year because it's the NFL. It's going to be different. So I don't want to sit here and say that he's not going to have growing pains because I think every rookie goes through that. But I will say this. Here's my hot take. I could see him having a better year than Caleb Williams. I know some people are going to say that that's crazy, but it wouldn't surprise me that Jayden Daniels, when everything's said and done at the end of the year, ends up having a better year than Caleb Williams.
Yeah, I don't know how to judge him fully yet, so I just kind of played it safe there at the 28. I think McLaurin will be a 1,000-yard receiver, and I think McLaurin will have a pop-off year, but aside from that, you have the weapons, you got 2 running backs, you got some tight ends, you got some receivers, so kind of see how it plays on out. 23 spot, Geno Smith.
Yeah, I had Geno at 21, and again, I still think Geno's the guy going into the start of the year. It does, make me wonder if Seattle, given that they've got a new coaching staff, given that they brought in Sam Howell from Washington via trade, makes me wonder if they're going to have a QB battle there. So this could very well change in my rankings closer to the season, depending on how that plays out. I think Geno has definitely resurrected his career and found a home. But I also think that that Howell is definitely someone that they brought in to compete. I mean, Howell, he played well for Washington last year. He's a young guy, and the new coaching staff could very well decide that they don't want to ride with Geno. So we're going to have to watch this, throughout training camp and see how it plays out, closer to the season in regards to who they decide to go with. But listen, you got DK Metcalf, you've got JSN, you've got Lockett. You've got Walker as your running back, right? I mean, they've got a lot of weapons on that offense. And last year he threw for over 3,600 yards, and he had over 20. He had 20 touchdowns, so his TD production wasn't as high last year, but he still threw for 3,600 yards
and missed 2 games.
And he missed 2 games too. So I think Geno's really earned the opportunity to be the starter there. With the new coaching staff, though, it's really kind of hard to judge. Would I say Geno is a starting quarterback in fantasy? I still think he's a backup at this point. I think it's a huge risk to rely on your team with Geno Smith as your QB. Is he definitely a bye week replacement? Yes. But keep in the back of your head the fact that depending on how training camp plays out and whether they decide they want to go with Geno or how, that again could impact his ranking here.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything there. I think you hit that pretty spot on, and we're pretty close ranking wise there between the two, so I don't think there's much more to be said. Trevor Lawrence.
Okay, so I had Trevor Lawrence at 20, and that might have been a little bit high, to be quite honest with you. Frankly, seeing where Wiggs has him ranked, I can definitely see him at 25. Listen, I'm not a huge Trevor Lawrence fan. I don't think he's done anything to show, he threw for 4,000 yards last year and 21 touchdowns. The year before, he threw for 4,100 yards, and then his rookie year, he had 3,600 yards. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he is the franchise quarterback for the Jaguars. Yes, they did end up going to the playoffs last year. But I'm just, they lost Calvin Ridley. They got Travis Etienne. Who's the receivers again? They got
Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis.
Yeah. So, they got Ingram. So they do have weapons on offense. I don't know. My gut is telling me that Trevor, he signed his big deal this year, which again, $50 million a year is insane. I'm sorry. That's just my opinion. He signed his big deal. I kind of feel like he's going to have a letdown year. That's my opinion. Some people may disagree with that, and that's fine. I don't, I just think he's going to have a letdown year, and I'm not really high on him this year, so.
Yeah, he's not going to have as good of a year as he had last year. Like, you lose Calvin Ridley, which, if we're being completely honest, he missed quite a few easy throws to Ridley. But, I don't know. Their receiving core doesn't impress me too much. They have a rookie and Brian Thomas coming in, and, Christian
I think Brian could be good, but I just don't know that Trevor is going to be the guy that's going to make him look good.
But you have Christian Kirk as your wide receiver 1, who's really only had one good year in his career, and then Gabe Davis has always been like a second or third receiver behind others. So I don't know. We'll kind of see how it goes. Again, I think this is someone, to me, is a bench player at best right now. If he ends up starting off the year pretty hot, then maybe a starter, but I think that's all that.
Yeah, in a 12-man league, I definitely don't view him as a starter, so.
Derek Carr.
Here's another one where Wiggs and I maybe disagree a little bit. Derek Carr is an interesting character. He did really, I thought he did well with Vegas. I think that he threw for what was 3,800 yards and 25 touchdowns last year. But I just don't know. I'm just not convinced that. Well, first of all, I think that he definitely does not have chemistry with Olave right now. Maybe that changes over this offseason with Michael Thomas gone now. Who else do they got at receiver? They got what they got
Rashid Shaheed.
Rashid Shaheed, and St. Brown is on their team now. Amron's brother. So they got Cedric Wilson, they got Johnson and Hill at tight end. I mean, you got Kamara in your backfield, and then I believe they drafted a rookie this year, didn't they? Or well, they got Kamara and Miller in their backfield, along with Jamal Williams. So it's not like their offense is lacking weapons. I just um, I just need to see that chemistry between him and Olave. Maybe that happens this year. Olave to me is a tremendous talent. I mean, I think that guy, he's going to be a great receiver in this league. But I think this is the make or break year for Derek Carr and with the Saints. If Carr goes out there and he shows he's got chemistry with Olave, with Kamara and the other weapons they have, and he shows that he can lead these guys into the playoffs, I think that'll prove me wrong. I think if he goes out here and he has a mediocre season and he doesn't uh, have that chemistry with Olave, I think it's going to be a long year for the Saints. I think that if they don't make the playoffs, I think that it could be Carr's last year um, as as their quarterback. They also drafted an interesting QB in Spencer Rattler, which has gotten a lot of talk. He was one of the names that came up during the draft as a potential surprise QB out of this draft class. So I think he's going to have some. There's going to be a lot of talk around Rattler as well. So I think this is a make or break year for Carr. I'm sorry, I don't view him as a starter. That's just me. I think he's an injury replacement, bye week guy at best. But even with an injury replacement, I think that there's some other guys that I would take over Carr. I mean, I definitely would take Geno Smith, over him. I would take a couple, Baker Mayfield over him. Jayden Daniels. I mean, a lot of the guys underneath. There's a lot of guys underneath that I would take over Derek Carr.
I think Derek Carr will be consistent with what he's done. Like looking at his numbers, like he's only had 1 year where it was like outstanding, but every other year he's just been consistent for the most part. So I think his connection with Olave will be better this year, and it's going to have to be for them to have a successful year. And like you said, Thomas gone is, I think, going to help Olave a lot, and Olave is just someone who I think highly of as well. So aside from that, you do have quite some depth there at running back looking at it, so you got a lot of options. I think it'll be a good year for Carr. Backup at best again, but that's kind of how it's going to be here for the majority of these guys. Bryce Young.
So this is another one where Wiggs and I are a little bit different from a ranking perspective. Um, do I think Bryce Young's going to have a better year than last year? Yeah, absolutely. I think Charlotte. I think Carolina. They brought in Deontay Johnson. They drafted a rookie wide receiver in what was it, Leggett, Xavier Leggett. They've got Adam Thielen. If he remains there, there's been a lot of chatter about him potentially, um, maybe getting traded. Um, I know a lot of people aren't high on Mingo. I still think that there's some some talent there with Mingo. They got Jatavian Sanders at tight end, which I think is going to be a sleeper tight end this year. They still got Hubbard at running back, and then they drafted who they draft at running back. They got Jonathan Brooks at running back. So, and they still got Miles Sanders. They brought in Rashad Penny as well. So I think Bryce is going to have a definitely a better year than he did last year. Last year he played 16 out of 17 games. He threw for 2,800 yards there. Threw for 2,800 yards. Only had 11 touchdowns. But here's the thing with that. They did not do him any favors when they drafted him in Carolina. They got rid of all their weapons. They got rid of DJ Moore. And they, yes, they had decent running backs. I think they brought in Adam Thielen thinking he was going to light up the world. And don't get me wrong, Adam still had over 1,000 yards last year, but he's up there in age. They didn't do him any favors last year. They went out this year and they strengthened their offense. I think Deontay Johnson is going to have a bounce back year. I think Adam Thielen is going to have a huge impact on not only Deontay, because of his, experience, but I think Leggett is going to come in and have a good rookie year as well. I don't think Leggett's going to light it up, but I think that they actually went out and they got, Jonathan Brooks. They're talking, I believe he was the best running back from a ranking perspective in the draft. So they went out and they actually brought some weapons in to help out Bryce Young. I think it was really an injustice for people to trash on him like they did last year. I mean, guys like CJ Stroud don't come in and have years like they do their first year like that. It was a really, I think it was really unfair to Bryce to judge him that way. I think he's going to have a bounce back year. I definitely see him throwing for at least 3,500 yards this year. And I think his TD production is going to be definitely up over 20 TDs. I think Carolina is going to be a surprise team this year. And what I mean is that they're definitely going to be better than last year. I don't necessarily know that that's going to translate into them going to the playoffs, but I think they're going in the right direction, and they're definitely taking the right steps to get this young quarterback, who I still believe can be a franchise quarterback, given the right weapons. I think that they're stepping in the right direction. So I don't see Bryce as a starting quarterback at this point in fantasy until we get to see how this plays out and stuff. Again, he's definitely a bye week replacement for sure. But Wiggs, what do you think?
Oh, I think he'll have a pretty solid year here. You look at his stats; he threw for over 500 attempts, completing 300 of them. So he's sitting there around like a 60% like completion rating, and he's really not far off from other quarterbacks. He really just didn't have like a ton of yards behind his throws, and he clearly lacked in touchdown production there in the passing game. But I think
they didn't have the weapons last year from the receiving perspective.
Well, yeah, but you still got to
I think they were
get it done. But
well, I think they were really relying too much. They were thinking Thielen was going to be the answer, and let's be honest, Thielen's getting up there in age.
Yeah, but you still got to get the touchdowns done. Like yes, didn't have the receiving core you wanted, but a lot of it was just, from the looks of it, check down throws that really just weren't gaining a lot of yards. But moving on. Will Levis.
So Will, he's an interesting quarterback in my eyes. I think he surprised a lot of people when he took over in Tennessee last year. I think the fact that they went out and they signed Ridley, and they're going to have who they got. They got Ridley and Hopkins.
Tyler Boyd.
They still got they got Tyler Boyd. I know there's talk about Treylon Burks, possibly getting traded out of there and stuff. But between Boyd and Hopkins and Ridley, and then they brought in Pollard, and they got Spears at running back. They've got a solid tight end. I think Tennessee's going to look a lot different this year than they did last year without Derrick Henry. I think Will Levis is going to be slinging the ball this year. I really do. Um, I think that Calvin Ridley could have an outstanding year. A lot of people I know were saying that last year was a bust for him. Um, Listen, it was his first year back. He was still getting his sea legs in games and stuff coming off his suspension and everything. I just think he was the expectations were set maybe a little bit too high for him. But I can see Ridley bouncing back um, this year. A bounce back year. I think they got a solid wide receiving crew. I really do. I think it's definitely one of the best wide receiving um, crews that the Titans have had in a while. It's disappointing that they traded AJ Brown to the Eagles when they did. I mean, they're gonna miss. I mean, they're always gonna miss that. But I definitely think their offense is gonna look different this year without Henry in there, and it's not gonna be the run heavy offense that they've had in the past. I think Levis is gonna be slinging the ball. And again, I can see him passing for over 3,000 yards this year for sure, maybe even close to 3,500. And I expect some good things out of him this year. I still don't think he's at the starting level. I think he's got to prove that he can be a consistent quarterback, given that it's his first year from a fantasy perspective. But he's definitely a bye week replacement in my eyes.
Yeah, I think he'll have a pretty solid year. He's got three really good receivers around him, two running backs that can do it, a good tight end. Like, if you're not passing for a lot of yards in this offense, then like I don't know what you're doing at quarterback. So that's just my opinion. Like, you got the weapons now. Go out there and take care of business. Again, another guy considered just a backup or a bye week replacement. So Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, Deshaun, I think I might have ranked him a little bit high, um, but I think that last year he played what 6 games, so this is really going to be his first year back. Um, he's not going to have probably Chubb at the start of the year, but they got Jerome Ford. Uh, he's got a decent. Plus, they brought in Devontae Foreman. He's got Amari Cooper and Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore. And then he's got and how do you say his name? Inagwe, at tight end.
Njoku.
I'm sorry, Njoku. Um, so so they definitely have the weapons there. Uh, I'm just not. I'm just not. Now that maybe all the distractions are behind him, and he's coming in and he's gonna have a full season. Maybe he's gonna get back to the Watson of old. So, but until he goes out and shows that, um, I definitely don't think that he's a starter in fantasy at this point. But he's got the potential to be a starter. I think we just have to wait and see, how he comes out and plays.
Yeah, I think if he does what he did in Houston those 3 years where he was ranked like number 5 there at quarterback, he should have a pretty good year. I could see him borderline being a starter at some point throughout the year, but that just kind of comes down to how he produces. And he's got the weapons. He's got Amari Cooper. He's got Jerry Jeudy. He's got a pretty decent receiving core. You look at his team from back in Houston. What his wide receiver one and isn't even in the league anymore, is it? I forget his name, but he had some.
Wasn't it Andre Johnson? Or no?
No, it was Will Fuller.
Oh, Fuller. Yeah, he's not in the league.
Yeah, so I mean, he's shown he can do it. He's had, I think he might have had Brandon Cooks at the time too.
Yeah.
So he has had weapons in the past, and I think he's got a pretty good core of guys here. Like, yeah, Amari Cooper's getting up there in age, but I think Amari Cooper is still going to produce this year. I think Jerry Jeudy could have probably one of his better years, if not his best year this year, if Watson's on point. So we'll kind of wait and see there. And you obviously have Njoku, who he's shown connections with already. So kind of just wait it out and see. He's just got to play a full season. You look at his last three years, and he's only played 12 games. So um, if he plays a full season, I could easily see him being a top 10 guy and having a pretty solid year. Moving on from him, we have Caleb Williams.
Yeah, so Caleb is interesting to me. There's a lot of hype around him as the number one pick for the Bears. The Bears went out and they brought in Keenan Allen. They've already got more. They drafted Odenzi. They've got Swift. They've got Roshan Johnson.
Cole
Komet at tight end. I believe they got a third running back as well. Herbert.
Yep.
So there's a. They also brought in Gerald Everett as another tight end with Komet. So they've surrounded him with a lot of weapons.
Talent,
which here's my thing about the Bears. You had Justin Fields. Justin Fields, to me, was given the shaft. The Bears drafted him, brought him in. They didn't surround him with weapons. The guy comes out last year. He shows that he can get the job done. He had a connection with DJ Moore, and you go out. I mean, DJ Moore last year had over 1,300 yards
and 8 touchdowns.
And that was with Justin Fields. And everybody's saying Justin Fields is terrible. Blah blah blah. Listen, Justin Fields was never given a shot. Their GM came out and admitted that they did not surround Justin with the weapons that he needed. I mean, Fields played 13 games for him last year and had over 2,500 yards. Yeah, that's not lighting the world on fire, but that's only in 13 games. I mean, he definitely would have been over 3,000 for sure had he been able to play the whole season. So they go out, they draft Caleb Williams, and they decided they're not going to make the same mistake, so they surrounded him with weapons. And that's great. It's great that they did that. Here's the thing. Here's my big question mark. Caleb, again, he's a number one pick. He's coming out of college and stuff. He's going to be a rookie. There's definitely going to be growing pains. I wasn't sold as him being the number one pick coming out of college. I definitely think that, with the weapons that he has, he could have a successful year. I definitely think he can and stuff. Time will tell. I still think that Jayden Daniels could overtake him at any point. But I will say this: I ranked him higher than Daniels because I just think that the Bears went out and they surrounded him with a bunch of weapons. I mean, how can you not have a successful year? I mean, listen, if the Bears stay healthy this year and they don't have a successful year, then there's obviously there's something wrong because they definitely, from an offensive perspective, have really improved their team. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out for Williams. So
yeah, it should be interesting. And like you said, he's got like a ton of weapons around him. Like, you have to think he's gonna produce to a decent amount, and I think our placings of him there at 18 and 16 are pretty good based on what he's got around him. Now, he's going to have some growing pains at the start of the year from turnovers or miscompletions or anything along those lines, but I just find it really hard to believe when you have Keenan Allen and DJ Moore and Swift and Komet, like all your weapons, that you're just not gonna have a good year, So
Yeah, and I know some people might be looking here and they might be saying, "Hey, Papa Wiggs, I noticed that you got Jayden Daniels ranked higher than Williams." Because I had Daniels ranked 17 and Williams ranked 18. Here's the reason why I did that. Just so everybody knows, I think that from a fantasy perspective, Williams could have more points because of his legs, or not Williams. I mean Daniels. So that's why I ranked Daniels higher. I think that Daniels has the potential of producing more red zone touchdowns than Williams because of his legs. So don't read too much into that. I know some people are gonna um, say you're crazy for that, but I do think from a fantasy football perspective, I do think Daniels is gonna have more points than Williams.
Interesting take. Interesting. 16 spot, Matthew Stafford.
Uh, Stafford is interesting to me. Let's see, he is, he had some struggles last year, um, but he still ended up throwing for what 3,700 yards,
3,900
or 3,900 yards in 15 games. Uh, you know, and he threw for what 24 touchdowns.
Yep.
So he's got Puka, he's got Cup, they got Kyrene. They drafted Blake at running back. The rookie.
Blake Corum.
Yep, and they got Demarcus Robinson as another weapon there who showed some spark last year as well. So I think that the Rams, and I think Matthews, I think he's going to have a similar year this year that he did last year. I do. He's right on the cusp, as a starter for me. I had him ranked at 13 on my list. So I think he's right there. I wouldn't fault anybody for taking a shot at Stafford and starting him. Because I think with his weapons on offense and the season that Puka had last year, Cup's hopefully going to be able to stay healthy all year, and maybe Cup will have a bounce back year in Robinson. So I do think that Stafford is definitely going to have a similar type year. He might do a little bit better this year based on how Cup comes out and does. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I could see him totally having a great year, but for some weird feeling, my gut's telling me that he's gonna take like a minor setback this year. I don't know what that might be, but I don't. Looking at the list of other quarterbacks I put ahead of him, I just feel like.
Well, he's 36 years old, so he's not a spring chicken anymore. So
Yeah.
I mean, there's the possibility that he could miss a few games,
Yeah.
just like he did last year. So.
But time will tell. We'll just have to kind of wait and see how the season goes. I would consider him a starter at any given point. It's Matthew Stafford. Like the dude can produce any given week. So, that's kind of just a gut call on your end, or kind of depending on who your quarterback is and when you drafted one. I could totally see him being a starter. Moving on, we got Kyler Murray.
So Kyler, yeah, we're pretty close on this
Yep.
one. I mean, you had him at 15, I had him at 14. Kyler, obviously last year was kind of a wash for him, because I don't think he played that many games last year.
I think it was only 9.
So last year I think was kind of a wash. Yeah, he played 8 games and stuff. But he's got Marvin Harrison, and Zay Jones went over to Arizona. He's got Michael Wilson. He's got McBride as his tight end. His running backs, he's got Connor
They
and
drafted
Benson.
Benson, I believe, right?
Yeah, and I know a lot of people are high on Benson as a rookie. Obviously, Harrison Jr. was the slotted the hottest wide receiver coming into the draft. So obviously, if Murray stays healthy this year, he's gonna have. I mean, he's gonna have a bounce back season. I I arguably has the best tight end in the league in McBride. I think you can make an argument that McBride is gonna, definitely gonna be the top tight end, if not in the top three this year. So he's gonna have a bounce back year, and again, he's on my right on my short list of. I wouldn't fault somebody for starting him, um, because he definitely could be a starter in a 12-man league. He's right on the cusp of being a starter. So, and he's definitely gonna, if he stays healthy, produce more this year than he did last.
And he's also a running quarterback, so he could put up more points from a rushing touchdown perspective. Even looking at last year in the 8 games he played, he ran in 3 touchdowns. The year prior with the 11, it was 3 again. But he's had years where he's had 5+ touchdowns rushing and well over 500 yards. So
Yeah,
that kind of just adds to his value there on top of what he can do from a throwing standpoint. Like in his first 3 years, it was an average of 3,900 yards and 500 rushing yards. So like, there's a lot of value that can come out of Murray as long as he has a good year and produces. And Marvin Harrison, I think, is going to be nuts this year. But moving on, Jordan Love.
yeah. So Jordan Love, he's. Let me just say something. Being a longtime Vikings fan, there is no love for the Packers here. But the one thing I will give the Packers credit for is, man, they know how to draft quarterbacks.
They know how to be a pain in our.
So they had, before Love they had Aaron Rodgers and then Brett Favre. I mean, these guys have set themselves up at the quarterback position really well. Man, Love last year, he played 17 games. He threw for over 4,100 yards. He had 32 touchdowns. His receiving core is crazy. If Watson can stay healthy this year, he's going to be a comeback player of the year, I think. Jayden Reed showed sparks last year. Wicks showed sparks last year. Dobbs showed sparks last year. Musgrave is an up-and-coming tight end. Oh, and did I mention they went out and they brought in Josh Jacobs for a running back.
And draft Marshawn Lloyd.
They drafted Marshawn Lloyd. They got A.J. Dillon. Boy, their offense is, again, let me say, I am not a Packers fan. But they do have a loaded offense, and their receivers stepped up last year. Their young guys stepped up with Watson being out. They definitely have the ability to mix things up with their offensive weapons. So I expect that Jordan Love is going to have a similar season to what he had last year. I may have ranked him just a little bit low, and that's probably on purpose on my part because he's a Packer. So he probably could be ranked a little bit higher. I think he's going to have a similar year. I definitely see him as a starter in fantasy football. He's, even though he fell at 14 here on our list, I see Jordan Love as someone that could definitely be a starter and maybe surprise some people this year. Not to mention he also did have 4 rushing touchdowns and 247 yards. Was it 200?
Yeah,
247 yards rushing last year. So again, he's mobile. He knows how to get out of the pocket, and he creates a lot of problems for the opposing team's defense. So I think he's probably gonna be one of the next quarterbacks to sign for a decent contract. I think.
Yeah, I think he'll have a pretty similar year, especially if Watson stays healthy. I don't know if he'll throw for as many touchdowns. That's kind of the only reason I ranked him lower on my list. I could see that drop off slightly to like 26 or 27. And I don't know if he'll run for another 4 touchdowns this year as well. So that's kind of why I ranked him a little bit lower. I think there's some upside to some other quarterbacks ahead of him in my decision making, at least that I see. So yeah, Jordan Love though, like you said, easily could be a starter. If you're going back and forth between like him and someone like Dak Prescott or someone else who I think is around the same level, same caliber, like he's definitely a starter in a lot of people's eyes. And I think anyone really at this point that we mentioned can be a starter at any given point. So to move on from Jordan Love, we are going to be going on into Dak Prescott. Two fan favorites back to back for my dad.
Yeah, so listen, I get it. Dak had a great year last year. He threw for over 4,500 yards. He threw for 36 touchdowns. He had another 2 rushing touchdowns. Ran for 240 yards. Sorry, I'm just not a huge Dak fan. I never have been. Um, you know, uh, I just not a huge Cowboy fan. I actually probably like them less than I do the Packers, which coming from a Vikings fan is hard to hear. I think that they did absolutely nothing to improve their team over the offseason from the perspective of, um, you know, where it's anything that's going to show um, that he's going to have a better season. I think that they're still in negotiations with CeeDee Lamb. There's a very real possibility that CeeDee Lamb could sit out, if he doesn't get a contract. So I mean, you're hearing more and more that CD, might not even be at training camp. So I think his production is going to be dependent on the whole CD Lamb situation. Brandon Cooks has proven that he can be a receiver in the league, but again, Brandon is getting up there in age. What I'm just really shocked at is their running back situation. I know Wiggs thinks that Zeke's gonna have a bounce back year. Zeke's getting up there in age. If you look at their running back depth, they lost Pollard. They thought he was going to be the guy last year, and he wasn't. I don't personally. I don't see Dak throwing for 4,500 yards again this year. I think he's going to be right around the 4,000 yards, and and I think a lot of that depends on what goes on with CeeDee Lamb. But he's got who's he got at tight? He's got Ferguson at tight end, I believe, right? Yep. And so I mean they're gonna be productive. I think a lot of it's gonna depend on what their running game does, because if they can't get production out of their running game, and listen, let's be honest, last year I think that's the reason why he threw for as many yards as he did, is because their running game wasn't as productive as they were hoping, right? So, I'm not saying that Pollard didn't have a decent year. I'm just saying from a pure rushing standpoint, it wasn't as effective as they wanted. So I think his production is all going to depend on the running game and his production this year, of his offensive line. If they can protect them. So, but again, is he a starter in fantasy? Well, absolutely. I mean, I can't say he's not a starter. He'd never be a starter on one of my teams, but nor would I ever draft him. That's just me again. But I don't see him having the same type of year.
Yeah, and like I'm a huge numbers guy. Looking at the numbers, Dak has done this every other year. He'll throw for 4,000 yards and then he takes a hit. He'll throw for 4,000 yards and he takes a hit. Like, I don't know. Looking at the patterns and the trend here, for me, I think he'll fall off slightly. And like you said, they really didn't make any improvements on their offense, and to me, like you need another receiver there or something. Your third receiver, I believe, is Tolbert. Yep. And your tight end is really just Ferguson. Outside of that, like, yeah, you brought in Zeke, which again I think he'll have a bounce back year. I've said that in the mock drafts. Now I don't think it'll be what Zeke used to be at all by any means, but um, I think we'll just get a consistent Zeke performance there in Dallas. And aside from that, like, I don't know, I just don't see Dak having another year with CD Lamb like he had last year, because I think CD went for like, what was it, like 1,700 yards or something like that. Yeah, 1,700 yards on 135 receptions with 12 touchdowns. I don't see him having more than 1,500 this year if he even hits that mark, and having more than 8 touchdowns this year. So I think there's a fall off there, and I think that's kind of enough said there.
Yeah, if he even, if he's even given a contract and he plays.
Yeah. But to move on from that, we're going to move on to Tua. And don't ask me to say his last name because I will not work out.
Yeah, so Tua is interesting. We were really close on this one too. I had him at 11. Wiggs had him at 13. The big question mark around Tua is, staying healthy, right? From a weapon perspective, I mean, seriously, you got Jayden Waddle, and Tyreek Hill. I mean,
on Achan, Mozart.
And you got Achan and Mozart, and then you got Jalen Wright that I believe they drafted.
Got Odell as your wide receiver.
And they brought in Odell this year. They've got Geno Smith and
Durham
Smith as their tight ends. He's got all the weapons right there. I mean, he threw for 4,600 yards last year, 29 touchdowns, played 17 games last year, so it was an improvement from 2022, where he was having the issues with the concussions and stuff like that. If he can stay healthy, I think Tua definitely is someone that can produce. My big question mark with him is his health. I mean, 2022 he played 13 games. 2021 he played 13 games. 2020 he played 10 games. Last year was his first full season. So can he stay healthy is my question. If he can stay healthy, yes, he definitely, to me, can have another year like that. You've got, until someone knocks him off, I mean, and I'm a huge JJ fan, but you got Tyreek Hill, who came off of almost an 1,800-yard season last year. Do I think Tyreek's going to have 1,800 yards again this year? Probably not.
A yard off 18.
So, they just signed Waddle to a nice contract. I mean, so he's got all the weapons that you need. They brought in Odell and stuff. So if he stays healthy, I can definitely see him, having a great year. And spreading the ball out. And he could be around that 4,500 yards again and stuff. It just comes down to his health for me. Last year was his first healthy season. So if he stays healthy and he builds off of that, then yes, I see him as a formidable fantasy guy for years to come. But he's got to be consistently out on the field in order for that to happen.
Yeah, I agree, and he's got like a lot of weapons, like you touched on. Tyreek, Waddle, who 2 years ago both went for 1,300 plus themselves. You bring in Odell, that'll just bring a little relief there for those two, and I think Waddle will have a bounce back year and have a good 1,400 yards on his own. So move on, Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, so this one, another one that had kind of a gap between Wiggs and I. I got him ranked at 15. Wiggs has got him ranked at 8. Listen, if Aaron stays healthy, I think he's gonna have a really good year. I think he's got Garrett Wilson, obviously as one of his targets. Who's his other wide receivers there? I can't.
Mike Williams.
They just brought in. There's huge rumors floating around that the Jets are going to trade for Devontae Adams. if that happens, I think that's just
That
gonna
team's gonna be
that's
nuts.
gonna blow up his value. So but
Alan Lazard.
he's got Lazard. He's in the decline, but I you got Tyler Conklin. You've got probably arguably second best running back in the league, and Bryce Hall. If Hall stays healthy, let me just say this, and I said this to Wiggs before. Rodgers makes his running backs better. And the reason that I say that is because Rodgers knows how to check down into run plays that makes his running backs have more success than they probably would have with any other quarterback. Love him or hate him, he's a Hall of Fame quarterback. Yeah, he's 40 years old. I think he's out on a mission this year to prove that he can still do it, and I do think he has the weapons. Do they need some help at wide receiver? Probably. So I wouldn't surprise me if they make a trade. And let me just tell you, if they do trade for Davante Adams and he's got Wilson and Adams as
That
his
team's
receivers,
gonna be nuts with Brees Hall too.
I mean, because listen, Davante can come in there. He's going to be working not only with Rodgers, who he worked with all the years at Green Bay. The offensive coordinators is the Nathan or whatever his last name is. He worked with Rodgers and Davante in Green Bay. Listen, they have got. If that happens, that's going to boost Rodgers' value for sure. I don't think it's going to happen. I'd be surprised, but you never know. I mean, Adams isn't happy in Las Vegas, and Rodgers has been trying to get the Jets to bring him there. So you never know.
I mean, and like you said, if they brought him over there, that would just be insane because you'd be seeing Garrett Wilson and Adams. Like that's literally like a Tyreek and Waddle type duo, or like a Jefferson Addison. Like on top of that, though, you have Brees Hall, and then you have Tyler Conklin. Like your team's gonna be looking nuts at that point. And then like you bring in Adams, and your wide receiver 3 is Mike Williams. Like that's just crazy to think about. Unless they were to somehow, for some reason, trade Williams or something. I don't know. But
well, I know that Rob Williams is on the pub right now, so there's some question whether he's going to be able to start the season. But it's not uncommon for these guys to get put on the pub and come off during training camp. Yeah. Anyways, it'll be interesting to see. I definitely do see them bringing in somebody else either via free agency. It wouldn't surprise me if they maybe targeted Hunter Renfrow, or they try to trade for somebody. If it's not Adams, maybe they try to bring in Treylon Burks from Tennessee. It wouldn't surprise me.
I could even see them bringing in Michael Thomas or something.
Micah Thomas. It wouldn't surprise me if they bring somebody in. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Top 10.
All right, top 10. We're just going to have to pick up the pace then. Brock Purdy.
Yeah, so I got Purdy at number 10. Not sure where Wiggs has him because I can't see, but Wiggs had him at 12. Man, listen, this guy is playing for less than $1 million. Just comprehend that. This guy hasn't. San Francisco hit gold with this guy. Is he ever gonna light up the world? Probably not. But geez, he threw for over 4,200 yards and 31 touchdowns last year. If they sign Ayuk, or if they keep Ayuk after this season, which there's a lot of question marks about that. I personally think he's he might go, but they drafted Ricky Parcell, who got injured now, so that gives them a little bit of leverage. So maybe they sign him. If Debo stays healthy, you got the best running back in the league, and McCaffrey. George Kittle is one of the is a top 5, definitely top 5, top 10 tight end. This guy's got all the weapons he needs, and the way that Shanahan uses his offense, he sets him up for success. So he's definitely a starter, and I can see this guy having a similar type year as he did last year. Might be a little bit of drop off, but let me tell you this: if Ayuk doesn't sign a long term contract with them, and he's playing on on his last year of his deal, and Samuel stays healthy, I can see Purdy blowing up and getting close to maybe 4,500 yards.
And he's got the weapons, like you said. Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey. That is like a bulk of your receiving on top of Kittle too. Like, it's one of those offenses where if you don't perform, then you just look bad. In my opinion, like you have the weapons, utilize them.
And Purdy set himself up to be one of those guys that he's gonna get a deal from somebody. He can't. I mean, listen, I'll take Brock Purdy over Trevor Lawrence any day of the week.
I agree 100%.
So, if he doesn't get a deal with them, somebody else is going to give him a deal.
Yeah. Kirko Chains.
Yeah, so I had him at number 8. Wiggs had him at number 11. Had Cousins not got hurt last year, he was on pace
for over 5,000.
He would definitely could have had over 5,000 yards last year. I think he's gonna, he's proven to be solid. Yeah, he's 35 years old. Yeah, he's coming off an injury. But listen, he's got Drake London. He's got Kyle Pitts. He's got arguably, Bijan Robinson, top 5 running back for sure, if not the third best in the league. Darnell Mooney's proven himself to be a consistent receiver. Rondell Moore, so not to mention they've got Allegiar or whatever as the backup for Robinson. Kirk has got a lot of weapons, in Atlanta right now. I think Drake London and Kyle Pitts are going to have the best stat year of their careers this year with Kirk, as long as he stays healthy. Drake, I could see Drake London going for 1,500 yards. Wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. I definitely can see Kyle Pitts going for over 1,000 yards. I mean, this year, Drake last year had 900 yards. And listen, him and Pitts were not used the way they were supposed to. I have no idea what the Arthur Smith was doing last year. Pitts is a freak of nature. You can line him up as a receiver. You line him up as a tight end. This guy just can go out and do everything. And I think he's going to have a career year along with Drake London.
Well, they're talking about using him at receiver now too.
So I really think that, as long as Cousins can stay healthy, Atlanta's going to be a team to watch this year.
Yeah, I agree. And Kyle Pitts is going to have a year. Like, he's going to be crazy, dude. We've seen what Cousins does with Hawkinson. Even with his tight ends back in Washington with, I believe, Logan Thomas at one point had a pretty good year there with Kirk Cousins as well. So Kyle Pitts should pop off this year. I think Drake London will have a good 1,200 to 1,300 yards. I even think Darnell Mooney will be another guy that'll hit over 1,000 yards. I think 3 guys here on this team will receive for over 1,000 yards, and that may be a hot take, but if Cousins is fully healthy, like Drake London 100% over 1,000, Pitts 100% over 1,000. I could even see Darnell Mooney over 1,000. He's done it once before when his quarterback was Mitch Trubisky. Like, he's got the talent, and I could totally see him doing it. Bijan will rush for over 1,000 yards, I think, have probably another 500 in receiving. Like, it's going to be a really good year there for anyone on that Falcons offense. To move forward from Kirko Chains, Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, so obviously Richardson got hurt last year. I think he played, 1 game maybe last year?
4.
No, he played 4 games. here's my thing with Richardson. I'm really high on Richardson. I think this guy is going to be a tremendous quarterback in the league. He's only 22 years old. He's definitely got the legs. He can move it. He just needs to learn to protect himself. And I think every running quarterback, and this goes for Jayden Daniels this year as well, when they come out of college and into the pros, the one thing they need to learn is how to protect themselves when they run the ball. They got to remember you can't take those unwanted risks, of trying to get an extra yard or two and then, taking it and getting popped by a linebacker or safety or something. So I think if Richardson can stay healthy, which I fully expect he will, I think he's going to have a good year, not only from a passing perspective, but from a running perspective. He's got Pittman as his receiver. Who else has he got? He's got Pittman, Josh Downs,
Adonai Mitchell, who they drafted.
He's got Adonai Mitchell. They got Pierce, who's showing some sparks. Jaleel Woods is another good target at tight end. He's got Jonathan Taylor as his running back. So I think that Richardson is going to have a good year, probably around 3,000 yards. I could see him having maybe, around 500 yards rushing. I could see him throwing for 25 touchdowns and possibly running for another 5.
I would have ranked him higher if he showed more of a passing game last year. Like his completion percentage was pretty good throughout his 4 games that he played, but like I felt like he was trying to escape the pocket more than he needed to sometimes, and I don't know, extend plays too much, which I think hopefully he learned from last year. I think that's part of the reason he got hurt too, is because he was trying to do too much at times. And I think if he can just get a grasp on staying, more composed in the pocket and being relaxed, throwing the ball, that he'll have a pretty solid year. I think his rushing upside is a huge plus, especially in the red zone. I think honestly he could be someone like Josh Allen from a rushing standpoint. Once you get in that red zone, he's not only capable of throwing the ball, but you have to be aware of him running the ball because he could put up a lot of touchdowns rushing, and I think that's where a lot of his upside will come from, is the rushing aspect. In a sense, he kind of reminds me of Justin Fields too. Like I don't think he'll put up like a crazy amount of passing yards. Like I think he'll be around like the 32 to 3,500 range, but I could easily see him going for like 600 plus yards of rushing as well.
Yeah, he actually reminds me a lot of Josh Allen just from his size.
True, and he put on more weight this offseason too.
Yeah,
he
so I think Richardson's got a lot, definitely upside.
I think there's a lot of upside, and I think he'll have a pretty great year. He's one of those guys I'm sold on, and I know you are as well. So, moving on, one of your favorites, Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. Listen, I know a lot of people out there are gonna say you got Mahomes ranked number 7. What are you guys?
Well, you got him at 6.
I had him at 6. Wiggs had him at 5. He ended up 7 on our list. Listen, yeah, did he throw for 4,100 yards last year and 27 touchdowns? Yes. Do I think he's going to do that again this year? No, I don't. I really don't. I think they've got a lot of challenges this year. I think they don't know how long Rashid Rice is going to be out. I think, yes, they got a couple rookie receivers that they drafted. Yes, they brought in Hollywood Brown. Yes, they got Travis Kelce. I really just think that Patrick Mahomes is not going, from a fantasy perspective, is not going to put up the numbers that he has in the past. I think last year was a good indication that other teams are catching up with him. He only threw for 4,100 yards. The last 3 years before that was 5,200 yards, 4,800 yards, and 4,700 yards. And then then in 2019 he threw for 4,000 yards, and then he threw for over 5,000 yards in 2018. I just think teams are catching on to him, and I I just don't see him having the same kind of year. I think will he be around 4,000 yards? Probably, maybe, but I think he's going to be around 3,800 yards myself. I think they're going to transform their offense a little bit different, at least at the beginning of the season. I think with Pacheco in there as their running back, I think that you're going to see a little bit more of that. I just do I think Hollywood Brown is a decent receiver? Yes. Do I think Hollywood Brown is going to go crazy on San Francisco? No, I don't. Every year there's the flavor of the year at Kansas City where everybody thinks that this receiver is going to be great, and every year that's not what happens. Travis Kelce's getting up there in age. I believe Kelce's 36 years old this year. He's more worried about what's going on with TS than he is worried about football. I don't think Travis Kelce's going to have a productive year this year. That's just my opinion. And last year, Kelce, didn't even have 1,000 yards. He was at 980. I didn't feel that he had a great offseason. It wasn't a Kelce type season. And I don't expect that this year's going to be a Kelce type season. He's 34. I stand corrected. So I just don't see that their offense is going to have the big numbers like they have in the past. It's just my opinion.
I think Travis Kelsey of the bunch that you said will still be roughly around the same with 900 plus yards and a decent amount of Mahomes' touchdowns. So Mahomes does have to throw to someone. It's going to be all reliable there in Travis Kelsey. Now, I do agree with you on the Hollywood Brown standpoint. I don't think he's going to be as good as people think he's going to be on this offense. You look back at Hollywood Brown, he's only had one 1,000-yard season. That was with Lamar Jackson. Don't get me wrong, Lamar likes to run the ball, but Lamar is considered an elite quarterback. So, like, you would expect him to have a few more good seasons behind him, but he really hasn't had anything. And Hollywood Brown, like, I know we've talked, he was with this college quarterback the last few years. Don't get me wrong, injuries kind of took away from some of that, but he didn't do anything in Arizona either. So I think people are thinking too highly of him. Could he come out and have over 1,000 yards and have a great year? Yes, he could. Definitely, especially with Rice being suspended for anywhere from 6 to, I've heard, even 12 weeks of the year. Um, your only other competition really is Xavier Worthy, so we'll kind of see how it pans on out. Mahomes does have to throw to someone, seems to always have some sort of answer, have the yards behind it to have a good season, but I don't think he's any better than, honestly, I could even agree with the 7 spot right now with our averages, so I think we're pretty good with where we have them. Moving forward, we got Josh Allen up next.
Listen, I got Josh Allen ranked number 4. I'm a huge Josh Allen fan. Wiggs had him at 7. He's number 6 on our list. Here, the biggest thing that concerns me with Josh Allen this year is they got rid of Stephon Diggs. They got rid of Gabe Davis. Yes, he's got Cooking. He's got James Cook in the backfield. Yes, they drafted a receiver. So who's his targets this year? They got
Keon Coleman.
They got Keon Coleman, who I think is definitely going to be a decent rookie. Shakir showed some spurts last year. Yeah, they got Curtis Samuel. Yes, they got Dalton Kincaid. They brought in MVS, from Kansas City. I don't know. I'm just nervous about Allen this year. He threw for 4,300 yards last year. He's consistently been over 4,300 yards for the past 4 seasons. Man, I'm really nervous. I don't know that he even makes it over 4,000 yards this year. Prove me wrong, Josh. I hope you do. I just don't see it. I think Keenan Coleman is going to be a really good receiver in the league. But I just don't know that he's going to light up this year. It's always tough for a rookie to have a great rookie year. I think out of all of his targets this year, the one that's probably going to benefit the most is Dalton Kincaid. I think that Allen is gonna be looking for him more. I think James Cook is going to have a bigger role in the passing game, so I can see them maybe transitioning over to a Tom Brady-ish type offense, where they spread the ball out to their tight ends and running backs a little bit more. They still have Dawson Knox as well. So I just don't think Josh is going to be lighting up the world this year. I mean, is he going to still rush? Yeah, absolutely. I think he'll probably be similar to years past. He's probably going to have over 500 yards. Wouldn't surprise me if he rushes. I last year 15 rushing touchdowns. That's crazy, to me. I don't think he's going to have 15 rushing touchdowns this year. I think he's going to have maybe somewhere around 7 or 8. So I think his numbers this year are going to actually fall off from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah, and I think it's gonna fall off pretty decent. Like looking at his 4,300 yard performance last year, I think that's gonna drop to like 3,800. And then like I will agree with the 500 rushing yards. He's gonna have to do something with his feet from time to time, and I think he's gonna be around 6 or 7 touchdowns. He's consistently been around that range. So to me, having him at the sixth spot right now, honestly, is a safe bet. Maybe with those rushing touchdowns, if he gets a few more than I kind of expect, maybe he jumps up to like the top 4 range. But like you said, it's gonna be hard to really know with like his receiving core because Keon Coleman to me is the clear cut number one, even as a rookie receiver here. You look at everyone else in the team from Khalil Shakir to Scantling to even Curtis Samuel, Mac Hollins, and Chase Claypool. You don't know what you're going to get from any of those, and that could go really any direction. It's kind of like it honestly reminds me of the Kansas City receiving core last year. You never knew what receiver was going to do what on any given week, and it really just came down to the rookie receiver. And I don't know, because you could have some good performances out of someone like Chase Claypool, who has shown with a good quarterback that he can play well. When he was with Roethlisberger, he had almost 1,000 yard season there, and he had 9 touchdowns. So for all we know, their number one guy could be Chase Claypool. So we don't really know what's going to happen from their offense. Kincaid will have a good year. James Cook will have a good year. Time will only tell.
Yep.
To move forward from there, we get into our top 5. Joe Burrow. Oh, this will be the fun little debate here.
Yeah, so Wiggs has him ranked as number 1 again. It must have been on that same day he was smoking that good stuff. And then I've got Burrow ranked as number 9. Burrow's coming off an injury. He played 10 games last year. Listen, I think Joe Burrow's a good quarterback? Yes. Do I think he's going to light the fire this year? I don't. Does he have one of the best receivers in the league? Yes. He's got Chase, and he's got Higgins. And, Higgins obviously it's most likely his last year in Cincinnati. They lost Tyler Boyd, which I think is going to prove to be a huge loss. They lost Joe Mixon. Yes, they brought in Zach Moss. Yes, they got Chase Brown. I think, bringing in Moss was a good pickup. Moss is certainly no Joe Mixon, though. Joe Mixon is definitely, he's a consistent running back. Do I think Burrow's going to light up the world this year? No, I don't. Wiggs disagrees with me, and that's fine. That's great. That's what we're here for. It's all right to have a different opinion. I see Burrow maybe having 3,500 yards this year. Could he get 4,000 yards? Yeah. I just think the 2 big losses on their offense, Mixon and Boyd, especially Boyd, because Boyd was a tremendous number 3 receiver on that team, is going to have a huge impact on their offense. And so that's why I had Burrow ranked 9. I don't feel like he that he's going to have as great a year as some people might think he's going to.
And I obviously disagree, as I have him as my number 1. I think that's pretty clear. I think, and this could be a hot take, I think Joe Burrow's throwing for over 4,500 yards. I think he's going to have well over 30 touchdowns passing, and I think he's actually going to have a decent bulk of rushing touchdowns as well. I know that might be a hot take, but I have Joe Burrow as my number one here at quarterback, and when we get to our wide receivers, I have Jamar Chase as my number one. So I think Chase will have 1,600 plus yards this year with about 15 touchdowns. Clip it now. That's what's going to happen.
Well, at the end of the year, I'll be accepting your apology.
Yeah, and you won't be because he's going to be having a great year. I think T. Higgins is also going to go for over 1,000 yards. I think Higgins is actually going to have a really good year. I think he's going to be above 1,200 with about 10 touchdowns of his own right. So, there's that. And then I think Chase Brown actually will have a pretty solid year receiving as well. I think he'll have probably 500 to 600 yards receiving as a running back. I think he'll have a decent bulk of touchdowns as well. I do think he's going to take away a little bit from Zach Moss's production. And then you'll just have the, other guys catching the ball, like everyone else he throws to. He's going to throw to a decent amount of people. And I have him at my number one. I don't care how much of a hot take that sounds like, but it's Joe frickin' Burrow.
All right, let's move on.
Enough said. Jared Goff. We're close on this one at least.
Yeah.
Again.
So listen, I had Goff at 5. Wiggs had him at 4. Last year, I know Goff had over 4,500 yards, I believe it was. He's got arguably, one of a top 5 receiver in St. Brown. He's got probably one of the best tight ends in the league in Laporta. Raymond had a decent year last year. I think Jameson Williams is going to have a breakout season. That's just my take. So he's got 2 tremendous running backs in Gibbs and Montgomery. This guy is, to me, gets hammered every year. People trash him, but listen, my God, he threw for 4,500 yards and 30 touchdowns last year. I don't see the Lions letting off the gas this year. It would not surprise me if Goff comes out close to 5,000 yards this year. It wouldn't surprise me. I think that they have the potential to have 3 between their running backs and receivers, 3 guys at over 1,000 yards. I think Laporta is going to have over 1,000 yards. I think St. Brown is definitely going to have at least 1,500 yards, if not more. And I think Jameson Williams is going to have a breakout year. I can see him having 1,200 yards. I really do. I think the guy's got a lot of talent. I think he's going to fly under the radar, and I think he's going to be definitely a hot sleeper this year in fantasy. So that's why I have Goff up here, and listen, for all you haters out there of Goff, let me just say this. Look at his stats compared to Patty Mahomes. That's all I got to say.
You look at Jared Goff, too. Half of his career, he's thrown for over 4,500 yards. 4 of 8 seasons he's done it. Twice on the Rams, twice on Detroit. 2 of his 3 years in Detroit have been super consistent. 4,500 yards, averaging 29.5 touchdowns in each of those seasons. So, yeah. Y'all are doubting Jared Goff too much. I do agree to the point that St. Brown will have 1,500 plus yards. Laporta will have over 1,000. I'm not sold on Jameson Williams yet. He's done nothing since joining the league besides get hurt. I'm not sold on the guy. I don't think he'll go over 1,000. I could see him being around 7 or 8. But
well, in all fairness, when they drafted him, he was hurt. So now,
yeah, but in all fairness, you look at him last year and what did he do?
Well, he was coming. That was he was coming off.
Played 12 games, had 350 yards.
Yeah, he was still dealing with it. So I agree with you though. He's got to stay healthy. You don't help your team if you're not out on the field.
He hasn't done anything to prove himself to me.
That's why I think he's gonna have a breakout year.
But
mark it here, people.
But
Papa Wig says Jameson Williams have breakout years. Take that to the bank.
Looking at his running backs, like Jahmyr Gibbs will have, I think, probably 600 yards receiving himself. That might be a little bit of a hot take. I think that's where a lot of the yardage is going to come up. I think I agree with you. I think he'll have 4,500. I think a lot of it will come behind Jahmyr Gibbs, who I think is going to have 500 to 600 yards. I think he'll take away reps from David Montgomery. I definitely don't see Montgomery being used much in the receiving game at all. So I think that's where a lot of it'll come from is from Gibbs, who I think is around, like the 12 spot as a running back, but um, I don't think it's far fetched, for my Joe Burrow if this is how we're going with Jared Goff, but moving on. Our number 3, CJ Stroud.
Listen, I got Stroud as my number 1 quarterback. I know some people are going to disagree with that, and that's fine. Stroud had 4,100 yards last year. He threw for 23 touchdowns. He had 3 rushing touchdowns. He's not a huge rushing guy. He only had 160 yards rushing. But listen, he's got Nico Collins. He's got Stephon Diggs. He's got Tank Dell. He's got Noah Brown. He's got Dalton Schultz. They brought in Joe Mixon. They also got Damian Pierce. This guy is going to be spreading the ball around all year, and he's going to do is rack up stats and stuff. I believe that he's definitely, some people think he's going to have a sophomore slump. I don't. I think bringing in Stephon Diggs, to that wide receiving core, already having Collins and Tank Dell and Noah Brown, is going to just make him that much better. I think having Joe Mixon in there with Damian Pierce, oh my God, this offense is loaded. And I think it's not going out of the realm to say that Stroud could throw for at least 5,000 yards this year. I mean, he's going to be spreading the ball around to everybody. Everybody's going to be involved in that passing game. So he's the one that's going to benefit from that. Not only are the players going to benefit from it, but he's going to benefit from it. And I think Houston's going to have a tremendous season. I just think that they've done a great job there surrounding him with weapons. That's why I picked him as my number 1 quarterback, and I stand by that. I think he legitimately has a chance to get over 5,000 yards.
I definitely do agree to you on the fact that he does have a chance of getting to that 1 spot as quarterback this year and throwing over 5,000 yards. The only way I see that happening, though, is if he throws for at least 35 plus touchdowns this year. He needs to add on at least 12 from what he did last year. He's shown that he is smart with the ball. He only had 5 interceptions last year in his rookie year, on top of throwing for 4,100 yards and completing 319 passes. Like, if you're only throwing 5 interceptions there, like, that's not bad at all. Like, that's actually really good, thinking about it, especially from a rookie. But the only way I see him being number 1 is if he throws for 35 plus touchdowns. And I think that's fair to say within a PPR format when you have other people like Jalen Hurts or Jared Goff, Joe Burrow, like even Josh Allen could have a year like that where he still throws for a decent amount of touchdowns. Like, for me, it all comes down to how many touchdowns he throws. He'll obviously have at least 2 1,000-yard receivers, if not 3. Joe Mixon's gonna have over 1,000 yards rushing. I personally think he'll probably be around the 44 to 4,500 yard range, but he's got the weapons, like you said. You got 4 receivers, a tight end, you got 2 running backs, even though one of them's kind of meh. You got the weapons. You got to be able to get it done. Especially if you were able to get it done with pretty underrated crew last year. Like, no one expected Nico Collins to have over 1,000 yards. No one expected much from Tank Dell before he got hurt. Noah Brown, like, even Robert Woods was in the mix last year. Like, we'll kind of see how it pans on out here. Moving on to the number 2, we got Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, so we both had him ranked at 3. It's Lamar, right? So last year, Lamar was the MVP, right? So, I don't necessarily agree that he should have been the MVP, but he still had over 3,600 yards, 24 touchdowns in 16 games, and he rushed for over 800 yards and 5 touchdowns. His receivers this year, I think their receiving core is, he's got Zay Flowers, um,
Bateman,
Bateman,
Aguilar.
Aguilar, and so I think he's got, and obviously he's got Mark Andrews, right? So, and then his running backs this year are definitely a lot different. They got the King, Henry, in the backfield. They got Keaton Mitchell and Justice Hill. Obviously, King Henry was a big addition that they made in the offseason. Here's my take on him this year. I think Lamar is gonna continue his connection with Mark Andrews. If Mark Andrews stays healthy, I think Andrews is gonna have 1,200 yards. And he's obviously a big target for him in the red zone. I think Rashad Bateman, if he stays healthy this year, I'm hearing that he's put in the work this offseason. I think he's gonna have um, the have a breakout year this year. And I think Zay Flowers was definitely had a great rookie year last year. So I think Lamar's gonna have probably definitely a better year. Wouldn't surprise me. With Andrew staying healthy and he stays healthy, he's gonna have over 4,000 yards. And I definitely see him definitely having, um, you know, 500 plus yards this year. His yard total might go down a little bit because of King Henry, but it could, it might still be around 800. So, but I definitely think it'll be over 500 plus yards, and I definitely see him right around the 5 TD rushing mark as well. And he'll probably, I probably wouldn't surprise me if he's around the 30 TD passing um, range too. So
I think adding Derrick Henry to the team is going to force him to be in the pocket a little bit more. So I could definitely see him throwing for over 4,000 yards. I think Zay Flowers will obviously have over 1,000 yards. Mark Andrews definitely will. Bateman, I could see around 800 yards himself. I can even see likely having like a good 500 to 600 yards on top of it. Because I could see them totally using two tight ends. I think adding Henry to the team opens up a lot because you could run a lot more two tight end setups and free Henry up a little bit. I think it'll help the passing game because he can run a lot more play action because he's got, a top running back on his team. He can run a play action. And I think it'll actually benefit them in the red zone running a play action because we all know what Lamar can do on his feet. It literally could be a quick little play action. He could just take off for a touchdown. Like, I know people are stressing that, oh, Henry's on the team. He's going to take away from his rushing yards, which, yeah, he's going to. He's probably only going to be around 500 to 600 yards, but I think that frees it up more so for the touchdown aspect of it, which at the end of the day, if your quarterback's running in a touchdown, that's just as much as running, 60 yards. Like, that's all he needs. I think he's going to be around 7 to 8 touchdowns this year, throwing over 4,000 yards and probably like 26 or 27 touchdowns. So, moving on to our last man of the hour. I think we all know who it is. Jalen Hurts.
yeah, so I had Hurts as my number two. Same with Wiggs. Uh, you know, Obviously Hurts last year he had what thrown for 3,800 yards, 23 touchdowns. He rushed for what over 600 yards. Geez, he had another 15 rushing TDs. Listen, do I think he's going to have 15 rushing touchdowns this year? No. Do I think the tush push is going to be something that's going to work as well this year for them? No. They lost Jason Kelsey. He was the guy that made the tush push work. He retired. I don't see the tush push um, working as effectively as it did last year. So I like I said with Josh Allen, I think you can cut his Russian TDs in half. I see him maybe around 7 or 8, if that, possibly less. Um, he's got AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. I mean, they're definitely a huge duo. Paris Campbell's in there as well. Um, Dallas Goedert is definitely one of the better tight ends in the league. They picked up Saquon as their running back, and they got Gainwell as his backup. Obviously their offense is going to be good. Um, I think where he loses the touchdowns in the rushing aspect, he picks it up in the passing game. I can see him being close to around the same this year as he was last year. I think Saquon, um, if he stays healthy, probably is going to dig into Hurts's rushing total more because Saquon's definitely, if he's out on the field, is definitely going to be an active part of their offense in the rushing game. So for me, I see Hurts having between 3,800 and 4,000 yards passing, probably right around 30 TDs. Passing. I think his rushing yards dips down a little bit this year. I think he's going to be maybe between 300 to 500 yards rushing, and I definitely think his rushing TDs are going to be around anywhere between 5 and 8 rushing TDs. I don't think it's going to be 15. I don't think the tush push is going to work like it did in the past for them. It would surprise me if you see him maybe even get away from it a little bit. So anyways, that's how I look at it. I definitely think he's got two of the better. AJ Brown is arguably a top 5 wide receiver in my eyes. The guy's a beast. Devontae Smith has proven to be a really great, consistent second receiver. So I definitely think he's got the weapons on the team, and it wouldn't surprise me if he finishes number 1. It wouldn't surprise me if he finishes behind, C.J. Stroud and Lamar and even Joe Burrow. I think it just kind of all depends on how their offensive line looks this year, and where where he ends up with his rushing yards and rushing TDs. Because really, let's be honest, his 15 rushing TDs are the reason that he got pushed up in fantasy points last year. So
Yeah, and I think stat wise, I think he'll be around the same. I think he'll throw a few less interceptions, throw a few more touchdowns. I think, honestly, me personally, I think he's still going to be around 9 to 10 rushing touchdowns as well. I've seen a lot of, clips and talk about Jason Kelsey being in the facility quite a bit, so maybe he rubs off on the new center there, and maybe their push push still works. And Jalen Hurts is a big body, so like I could still see it working regardless. But
yeah, it'll be interesting. So, well, Wiggs, there's our first rankings on the QBs, the top 30. Um, Man, let me just say thanks again for all your work on all the graphics and everything. You've done a tremendous job there. I hope everybody out there appreciates the content that we're putting out there. Please, check us out on Fantasy Fools PPR on our YouTube channel. Subscribe. We've got a lot more content. We just started with QBs. We'll be doing the running backs, the receivers, tight ends. We've been discussing a lot of different content that we're going to be doing this year. Wiggs, clips this stuff up, puts it out on X. We're out on Snap. We're out on TikTok, Instagram. Check us out. Subscribe, like, follow. We appreciate all of it. We hope you find our takes on the fantasy football PPR 12-man leagues a little bit different than some of the other takes that you're seeing from these other fantasy guys. Again, we don't claim to be experts. We're just giving our opinion, but we love fantasy football. We love talking about it. So we just hope that you take something out of this and enjoy the content.
and if you look at our stuff, you can clearly tell we're not sitting there and copying other people. Like you look at other sites and other, people who consider themselves experts, they have like Dak Prescott sitting there in like the top 3 or top 4 still, and
Yeah,
like I feel like our lists are a little bit different, and
we got different takes on those other guys. And hey, listen, are we going to hit on every take? No, we're not. But hence the name, Fantasy Fools.
Yeah.
So
we live up to our word. We'll give you some foolish takes, okay?
Right. So we're gonna give you some takes that you're gonna think are off the wall, but then we're gonna give you some takes that are gonna make you think. So just keep that in mind, and by the end of the year, I can guarantee you there's gonna be a lot of our takes that I feel on both sides, not just mine, but on Wiggs as well, that are gonna hit. And so
we're going to revisit those next off season. We will sit there and discuss and see Like, I'm keeping all these graphics, and we'll just see which ones we hit on and which ones we didn't, and it's gonna be a fun time.
Yeah. And keep in mind, this is our early rankings. As training camp starts here, which is starting up this week for almost all the teams, and as preseason games come on, rankings are gonna change. Based on injuries and possible surprise cuts, stuff like that. So
Even
keep that
midway
in
through the
mind.
year too.
But obviously, we're gonna always provide an update, updated rankings and stuff, so people can see that based on week by week once we get to the season. So.
Well, yeah, stay around until the season. Once we get to the season, it's kind of gonna be a more consistent schedule, I'd say. Waiver wire pickups, recapping games, talking about the games for the upcoming week, all that fun stuff. So,
hey, listen, we just want to give you another take out there. Hey, we're not one of those high budget guys. Hey, look at where we're at.
we're in a room recording this right now.
So we're not sitting here claiming that we know everything. We're just giving you another take that hopefully you find beneficial for when you're getting ready for your fantasy football season.
But yeah, other than that, stay tuned for future videos. Like my dad said here, wide receivers, tight ends, running backs, all that's going to be taken into account leading up to the season. We might do another mock draft or two. We might even drop some videos comparing like quarterbacks or talking more in depth on why maybe we picked like Joe Burrow as our number 1 compared to number 9 type thing.
Yeah, so we're gonna have a lot of different content.
Yeah.
So again, we appreciate all you guys checking us out, and share our stuff. If you like it, please share it. Not only subscribe or like or whatever, but share it. Let people know out there. That hey, listen, you might want to check these guys out. Anything you can do for us on that, we appreciate. In regards to that,
even if it's just clipping out our hot takes or takes you disagree with, and you're cooking us out on X or something, if you're sharing it, that's bringing more eyes our way. Which at the end of the day, it's content. It doesn't have to be
cook us all you want.
Yeah.
You're not gonna hurt our feelings.
We don't care. Like you disagree and you want to like call us out on some BS, go for it. I mean, you're just sharing it around at that point, which is still helping us. So,
all right. Well, until next time, see you guys.